Hello.
It's good to see you, Joanne. How are you?
I am
How's your
okay.
week?
Good to see
How
you.
was Oh, you had news this week. You finished your half of the Yale lecture series. Congratulations. How did
My,
that go?
my third. No, thank you. I did this big course I'm teaching at Yale with David Blight, Beverly Gage. We each get 8 lectures, and I gave my 8th lecture on Thursday.
Is that available for the public?
It is available for the public. They're putting them up bit by bit. It is called the Devane Lecture Series, Devane, and it is on YouTube. There's a playlist page that I don't know offhand, but it's out there.
So I'm gonna do a plug for your American Revolution series that is also available for free on YouTube as well, isn't it? That was older, but I actually watched that before I knew you.
Oh,
Yeah, and it was like I always loved it because you bring the history a lot to life in a way that I guess I'm good about the revolution now, but for a long time it didn't necessarily grab me quite as
yeah.
much as
No, I was I'm your revolution friend. I get to slap you around a little bit.
no, but that all of a sudden I'm like, oh, these are actually people doing stuff as opposed to guys in those stupid hats.
That's what most people think they are. So that's like one of my quests. Like, oh
Yeah,
no, they're real people.
well, it works. It works in that series, and I recommend that people watch it.
Thank
Or
you.
what I did is I listened to it when I baked, which was cool.
Nice.
My only great triumph this week was I dumped a bicycle, which was quite a nasty surprise for a 60-plus woman.
You mean fell on a bicycle?
Well, the bicycle fell on me, but yes, that was sort of the gist of it.
Yeah, I am sorry about that. That is not good.
No. On the other hand, I suppose it's good. I was out riding a bike, right?
Well, that's true.
And I'm mostly healed now anyway. So what about this week? Anything happen, or just want to same old, same old?
I know. Which, in a way, yes, the same old, same old. Sadly,
Well,
yeah.
same new, I guess.
Yeah, that would be better. Same new, same new. To me, one of the things that stood out, and then it got reinforced. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before that the second half of the story came out, but Jimmy Kimmel getting put back on the air to me was major. And then Sinclair, the Sinclair Company, is that what they're called? Corporation, whatever they are, agreeing like, okay, we're going to actually put it back on too. And I believe they said something like, due to feedback, serious feedback on all sides or something like that, we have decided to. So basically, there was this major howling, screaming fit about canceling Kimmel. He said bad things that made the president angry. And now, poof, it's gone. And not only is it gone, but the impact of having done that matters too.
Yeah, so I thought of you when that happened, because we're in this moment where it's very clear that the president and his loyalists are trying desperately to gather all the power of the federal government into their own hands. And that's scary to watch. It really is. Because if they can do what they are saying they can do, then in fact, we're already in a dictatorship. And I don't want to downplay at all the true horror here of what's happening to undocumented immigrants, as well as just people of color in the United States, which I also want to get back to today, because I think the parallels between that, well, I'll go into that later. But I did think the Kimmel stuff was fascinating, because I thought of you the whole time, because people pushed back. And as they pushed back, I think it was with you I was talking about the other day, that a lot of these corporations and law firms and so on have been kind of hedging their bets. They've been sort of saying they're going to do this, but giving themselves an out. And ABC took that out with Kimmel pretty quickly, and Sinclair said, we're not going to do it. Sinclair Media, I believe it's called. Yeah. And then what happened, it appears to have happened, is that people actually went to their individual Sinclair channels and made lists of the advertisers and called the advertisers. And the entire group of people who were boycotting Kimmel backed off. And now he's entirely back on the air. And to my eye, I'm not a Kimmel watcher, at least as anti-Trump as he's ever been before.
And his viewership, his audience is much bigger now because people, first of all, we're talking about him. I can't say that either one of us did that before. So yeah, it like came back and hit them in the face. And what's interesting too, I want to touch on what you just said, because I read about that too, that people went to their local channel and found the advertisers and contacted the advertisers, who then contacted Sinclair. A lot of people, so I've been, not surprisingly, over the course of the past week saying, like, look, pushing back matters. And some people have responded to that by saying, yeah, it's just the money. They're just responding because of the money. And I mean, so if that's one way for pushback to matter, fine. You know, I don't think that pushback only matters if people say, you are correct in your principles. We are turning and walking away because we are wrong. I don't, pushback isn't going to look like that. It isn't going to get a response like that. Pushback is whatever you need to do along the lines of, protesting, boycotting, whatever, along those lines. If it has an impact and the people who are threatening to censor or silence or repress decide not to censor or silence or repress, that counts. It matters.
Well, there's an old saying that the Republicans have always been much louder in praise and much louder in condemnation. And it seems that those who are opposed to this regime are learning that lesson. And, one of the things that jumped out to me with the Kimmel thing, again, I didn't watch him before all this happened, but one of the things that jumped out to me is that if you look at what the Trump tariffs and the deportations and the cuts to education and to healthcare and to research and so on are doing to the United States, they're hurting all of us, but they're especially hurting people in rural areas. And the rural areas are the ones that tend to take more from the federal government than urban ones, because they tend to be much older and have many fewer people in them. Obviously, they're rural. And also because they are quite a bit older than the populations in the cities where immigrants come and where people are younger. And so and there are much fewer of them. And, this shows up when you look at what G. Elliott Morris was saying about the fact that although Trump got, I think it was 49.1% of the vote, only 64.1% of American adults that were eligible to vote turned out. So that translates to about 32% of the American population voting for Donald Trump. And that was when he was at his peak of popularity. So if you do all those numbers and you're a business that is trying to make money, the idea of saying you're going to chase those MAGA voters or those Trump voters, rather than chasing the people in the areas that actually have money and are not being as badly hurt by the Republican policies, is just, it's not a good business decision.
But
if we take that sucker out for a spin, that's going to make a difference.
Oh, for sure. It is worth saying it's about chasing and running, right? They're chasing audiences, and you can have an impact. If you can have an impact on those numbers, that matters. The running part is they're also partly doing what they're doing out of fear or a hope to, avoiding trouble or whatever it is. There are also decisions being made that are just like, oh, this is scary. We'd better do X, that are the equivalent of capitulating or folding. So that's part of the equation. But I think in the same way that people want to dismiss what happened by saying, well, it's just a money decision, money talks. It's like, yep, money talks.
Yeah, money does talk. Your boy Alexander Hamilton was all over that. And actually, that's not a bad thing. I mean, I joke about him being your boy. I was always a Hamilton person simply because of the this is so bad after how badly I've rooted on Jefferson.
Well, that's what I thought you were heading off to say. I liked Hamilton because of how much I hated Thomas Jefferson.
No, actually, I don't think of them in the same way at all. As I suspect in some ways people don't, simply because they represent two such very different visions of the United States. But, Hamilton's recognition that you must get wealthy people to buy into the idea of a country is obvious. And that's, of course, why he wanted the national debt, is that people actually had a financial stake in the survival of the United States. And one of the things that worries me now is that with all these international corporations, and now with the attempt to divorce currency from nationality, you got a whole bunch of really, really, really rich people who are not invested in the survival of their countries, especially the United States, is what you and I mean, I care about the other countries, but that matters here.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And that matters.
No, it matters big time. And it's that very thing in his time, right? That he was like, yeah, of course you have to get the well-born and the wealthy to pay in to invest in the government, because if you've got a new government and has no power, that's going to help it. And then he was attacked for being this, and granted, he had issues with his policies and his, sort of preferences as far as policies goes, but that was a pragmatic decision. I'm leaping us onto another track, and we can leap back onto this track. But what it just made me think of, because you put me onto Hamilton, and then that put a Hamilton quote in my head, is
as it does,
as it does, sadly, all the time for me.
Will you sing it?
In my course, I sang the Erie Canal song, I will say, but that's my singing for the week.
No, I don't think it is.
They sang with me. The people, the class sang with me, so I felt better. But the point I wanted to make was Hamilton. This is not surprising, but he meant the word in a bigger way. Hamilton thought about national credit all the time, and of course, on one level, that was financial. But he also thought about national honor and national reputation, and on all of those fronts, he said credit is an entire thing. Wound one branch, and you wound the whole. I was thinking of the UN this week.
Oh, I want to hear more about this. I mean, certainly we can talk about the UN, but can you just spend a little bit more time on what that looked like? Because I love that. And I don't think I've ever heard of, I mean, I know about the concept of Dickens and using the term credit to talk about social relationships, that everything is sort of an exchange, but the idea of national credit as being about honor.
National credit.
Take it away, Dr. Freeman.
Take it away. In credit, I mean, if you think about the word credit, in the 18th century, when you're talking about who should trust who, and when a lot of even financial relationships are, I send you Mr. Smith by way of Mr. Jones, and I'm signing this letter telling you that he's trustworthy. Credit actually was a matter of personal credit. It wasn't just like, I'm a good financial risk. You were grounded in people who trusted you, and because they trusted you and you trusted them, that trust sort of moved in circles. So in essence, credit was a personal thing. It wasn't just a financial thing in this time period, and reputation was part of it. You couldn't be trusted financially unless you had the right kind of reputation, and the right kind related to that, credit. We've taken the word credit, or over the years, it has come to be seen as primarily financial, but it wasn't back in that age. So it was about reputation. There's a reason why Hamilton, at one point, he's horrified because national credit, national reputation is going down. And he says something along the lines of, not to defend national credit is to commit political suicide. And he actually uses the word suicide. He's talking about, in his mind, you have to think of the reputation and credit of the whole. That is the way that the world will think of you. Obviously, the UN set me off on this trend, but the idea that credit in every sense of the word is who we are and how we are judged. And one of the things I was thinking about this past week, and it relates to where we started, is that the American people are part of the credit and reputation of the nation, right? Nations aren't judged just based on presidents or just based on policies, where a nation is more than that. So I think that along the lines of, if we push back and people cave, it's just money. It's like, well, yeah, it is. But that happened because we, the people, pushed back.
Well, I want to go back a second. So if you think about credit the way you're talking about it, a serious part, especially in those days when you didn't have credit checks and things like that, a serious part of that was paying your bills, right? And that's, so when you say Mr. Jones is credit worthy, that means he's going to pay his bills, because everybody's got these interlocking series of notes on each other, debts and credits.
It's in the early modern world, there's a personal component to it that there isn't as much now.
Well, so this is why Dun & Bradstreet was a big deal when it rose in the 19th century, because they were the ones who they would go into towns and they would do reports on people's credit. But you're making me see it in a different way. They not only took a look at their finances, they talked about their reputation. Did people trust them? Did they not? Who did we talk to see if they were trustworthy, and so on. And that's how you knew if you could safely invest with that company.
Exactly. So, and I think if I remember correctly, that quote is from Hamilton's first report on manufacturers, which was when he first came forward and said, I'm not first report on manufacturers, first report on public credit, is when he came forward and said, here's what we need to do. And I think there's really interesting language in there in which he's talking about this very idea, because a new nation doesn't yet have credit in many ways, right? So that's what he was focused on.
Well, and there's, in this moment when we're coming up against a government shutdown and the constant threat that's been over our heads since the 1990s that we would not pay our bills,
right,
is, you know, I'm trying to get my head around how that connects to the soft power that has been part of our foreign aid since World War II, but also the soft power that is things like Hamilton, the musical, and the culture and the travel and the education with people from other countries coming here and us going there and so on, and how decapitating that, as this administration has done, in your terms, decapitates American credit.
And that's a really interesting way of thinking about it, because if you're trying to destroy someone's credibility, an opponent's credibility, an opponent writ large, not just a person, attacking culture as a soft way to get at credit is an interesting way to do that, right? Because culture, something like the Hamilton musical, yeah, that had an impact, a worldwide impact. People thought differently about the United States for whatever reason they did. But that is a form, culture is a form, does build up a kind of credit or reputation. So if you smack at credit, you're smacking at one way in which people can build that kind of honor and reputation that is not grounded on money and not grounded on policy. I have silence.
That's really interesting, you know, because again, one of the big struggles after World War II was the, what's that?
No, I thought you were silent for a minute.
We're each freezing. So, you know, it's interesting because after World War II, the, you know, one of the big things is defining America overseas as people spreading democracy, as people who show up in a crisis, as, you know, for all that they're all the stereotypes of the ugly American, they're also the stereotype of the U.S. is the first country there to help, in part because we're such a wealthy country, such a, you know, that we could afford to do that in a way smaller countries couldn't. But of course, that's just gone. I mean, this whole thing, though, for me, the big thing this week, actually, maybe this is a fun way to do these, where we just think about what jumped out this week. For me, the thing that jumped out, there were two things. One was that while the administration is cutting all this aid and all these policies in the United States, Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, turned around and said, we're going to bail out freaking Argentina to the tune of $20 billion because their right-wing leader, Javier Milei, has completely trashed the economy, and he's got an election coming up in October. And clearly we're spending taxpayer money to buy their securities and keep him, make the economy look better before this election. And I'm like, when did I sign up for my taxpayers supporting right-wing, you know, not a dictator, but right-wing figures around the world? And then the State Department sent around a memo saying that, you know, they've destroyed the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, which was the group in the United States that provided food for children and medical care and things, with the idea that if you manage to raise standards of living elsewhere, people would be less susceptible to the rise of authoritarianism, either on the left or on the right. That's been the case, you know, for decades. And they cut that. And yesterday the Supreme Court said they could do that.
Right.
But then they turned around and said, but we're going to take $1.7 billion of that, and we're going to use it for our own right-wing projects.
Right.
We're going to use it to stop the rise of communist, Marxist governments around the world. I'm like, excuse me, this is 2025, you know?
Let me
that, you know, they're destroying that soft culture you're talking about that has been ours since World War II, and saying we're throwing all that money, but also our soft culture, behind Javier Milei and Viktor Orban and these right-wing projects.
No, you're right. And that soft culture is our credit. It is who we are as a nation. which is much bigger than whatever people think of President Trump. But here's the question I want to ask. So because this is going to be not the way one would want this to happen, but because of all the cuts to programs and funding and things that Americans rely on, and whether we're talking about what's going to happen to Social Security, or whether we're talking about healthcare, or whether we're talking about whatever is being trimmed back, all the ways in which things have already been cut away and people are losing jobs. Do you think it's possible that in a way they have not before, Americans are going to understand the fact that all of the ways in which money gets spent are connected, and that when you see billions of dollars being given to bail out a right-wing person from another country, leader from another country, maybe people will be able to make the connection better that money, we have that money. Look at that. That's a lot of money. And we're not spending it over here. We're spending it over here. I kind of wonder if in this current climate that feels like increasingly a climate of, what do I want to call it? I don't want to say shortfalls, but like, less and less things being available to us and more threats of less and less things being available to us. Are people going to pick up on where money's being planted and taken away from in a way that makes them realize, like, hey, wait a minute, like you just said, that you're giving my money to that country, but there's this thing over here that would help me that you're not spending it on.
Or help my neighbors, because the price of groceries is eye-popping.
Yeah.
So I think certain things jump out. This $20 billion to Javier Milei's government is one of those things. But actually, I think that personally, that it's hard to watch all the different financial stuff, especially now that we have crypto in it. And I kind of think that's one of the places that you and I make a difference, in that my work has always centered on the language of ideology. And the bottom line is there are two very different ideologies at war in the United States right now. And I would suggest that they tie to your definition of culture, that broader, I'm saying not culture, of credit, that larger idea of culture influencing credit. One is that we should be using our extraordinary financial resources and everybody contributing to the idea that we're going to create a society in the United States and elsewhere in which people are created equal, and that the government gives people access to the same resources so they can work hard and rise. And on the other hand, we have an ideology that says that the country's resources belong to a very few, very wealthy, usually men, with the idea that they're really better and smarter than other people. And you can literally see this in Trump's executive order about these visas, that if you have $1 million that you get these visas, because by definition, if you can pay $1 million, you must be a really good business person, which is, just don't even start me.
Or you have people who will pay that $1 billion for you in industry. And again.
And that, I think maybe that ideology of look at where your money is going, but less, did you see the World Liberty Financial cryptocurrency that just did this? And that's a little in the weeds. It's a little hard to do.
Yeah.
And, but saying, hey, do you want your money to fund your neighbor who's fallen on hard times and needs food, or do you want it to prop up a right-wing government in Argentina? I just don't think there's really a lot of question about that. I really don't think a lot of Americans would say, $20 billion to Argentina is just ducky.
Oh, and that's such a Heather word. But no, yes, I think you're right? If you were to ask that question, would you rather do this for your neighbors or this for Argentina? I think regardless of their politics, most Americans would say, well, I think more about my neighbors, and I'm not sure why I'm doing this for Argentina per se. So I think that's actually, but that gets back to, and so I guess part of your answer is yes. I think, and you're right, I can't keep track of all of the, financial windows opening and closing and various currents, but this larger idea, and I can't even remember, it wasn't even just Argentina this past week. There was something else that grabbed me too, in which I was like, wait, what? Like, how much money is going there? And then in the same week. So it even if you're not trying to pay attention, it's kind of hitting us in the face right now.
Well, and that does go back to the idea that first of all, that people need to speak up, but also one of the reasons people don't know that's happening is because of the extraordinary disinformation coming from the MAGA Republicans. You know, this idea that well, we probably shouldn't get into that today, because I do want to actually talk about one other thing that you and I haven't talked about, but that's kind of bothering me. Not kind of bothering me a lot. You know, one of the things that is not in the news while the administration is constantly demanding our eyeballs, is not in the news as much as it should, is what's happening to undocumented immigrants and brown Americans. And the reason I want to talk about that is twofold. One, because I wonder if this is keeping it out of sight, keeping the raids and the detentions and the renditions. I mean, people are being sent to third countries and then resent to the countries that they had protection from the United States from being sent back to.
Right.
And that's just not in the news the way it should be.
No.
And there are two pieces of that interest me. One is, I wonder to what degree there is parallel between that and the degree to which it was possible, if you were a Northern American before the Civil War, to ignore the realities of slavery, because you sort of knew it was there, but there weren't photographs. There weren't, you know, the letters that you got were filtered through the media.
Wow, that's a really fascinating thing. You know what? And you know what changed that? The Telegraph.
Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Well, yes, but also the Telegraph, because suddenly people could see within 45 minutes, or hear in 45 minutes what was going on in one part of the country in another part of the country. So you had, you know, people like Northerners would say something in the North, and you know, I know this. I was in Washington. I saw that what slavery is, and vent about it in the North. And this is in the context of my last book. Come back to Congress, and everyone in Congress who was from the South knew that that person said that in the North, and would say, you think you're coming back here and you're going to work with me, and you basically just called me a barbarian. So the Telegraph meant that there was all kinds of, you know, not just between politicians, but Americans of all kinds could not do what they at one point did, which was, for example, there was one president that ran pro-slavery in one part of the union and anti-slavery in another part of the union, right? And you could do that because people wouldn't know, right? So that's really fascinating, because you're absolutely right that people don't see it. Well, and we've talked about, or if we haven't, I certainly blather all the time about how technology changes democracy. And this is one of those ways, right? Where you can see things that you maybe on some level know about, but when you see them, like the woman, I believe this was in New York this last week, right?
Yes.
Who was thrown across a hallway and pinned down by this guy who, you know, luckily did not have a mask on, and people saw that, and it was shocking. And again, they piped up about it, and I believe he's been fired, right? I don't think that's happened before.
There's a review. Well, but this takes us back to where we were.
Exactly.
And I'm afraid I don't remember now who it was, but I do remember who it was. It was J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, said to people, in order to resist this administration and the extraordinary extremes to which immigrations and customs enforcement, as well as some border patrol agents, are going, is he asked ordinary people to film it and to send it to authorities, and also to put it on social media. And you're seeing more and more of that now. And one of the things that was interesting about the thing you are talking about, where I believe the woman was from Ecuador, and she's trying to talk to this agent, and he all of a sudden seems to explode, and he takes her and he pushes her against a wall and throws her on the floor. That is the first time, in my understanding, that ICE has ever admitted that one of their people went too far.
That's what I'm saying. This whole episode was different. But I do want to add something here. You're totally right that having people film things and put them online is important. But that was happening in a way that perhaps did not get as much of a hold on the public during Black Lives Matters, when that was at its peak, right? And people were suddenly able to say, okay, this is happening routinely to Black Americans, film it.
Right.
And so the people could see something that had been going on for a long time, but now particularly white people could see this is what happens all the time.
Well, and similarly, the civil rights movement, Bull Connor's fire hoses,
right, the TV on TV.
But that goes, yes, exactly. But that goes back to the idea of speaking up and pushing back, because the more that people see those videos, and the more, one of the reactions to that video when ICE actually said, we're going to look into this, was that they are starting to recognize that this is a public relations disaster. And that, I think, is true. And sort of where we started, and where I'm always poking at you, is that the speaking up and pushing back really does make people in power change their behavior, at least in the United States, because there's so many of us.
And what's important about what that example that you just gave is that's not about money. That's about the public acknowledging, seeing, and pushing back. And in this, I mean, highlighting, exposing, talking about, getting other people to see it, what's happening, because it's so obviously wrong. And if people pipe up and say that, and enough people do, and they do it loudly enough, as you said, it's a PR disaster. And that's the sort of PR disaster that can spread.
And go just, I know we got to let people get on with their lives today, but to go back to where we started on this, somebody said on social media, and I wish I could remember who, that the whole plan of the white nationalists and perhaps the Christian nationalists in the administration has been to destroy the idea that the United States is a land of opportunity for everybody. And that, speaking of what you and I talked about last week, that to me was like a dagger, because of course that is what the American dream always was. And they are deliberately destroying the American dream to replace it with this idea of a few people having power. And there goes all of our credit.
Well, I was just about to say, if you want to talk about our credit, if you want to talk about our reputation, if you want to talk about our identity, our national identity, poking at that is smacking at all of those things in a way that probably people don't fully realize. That idea that almost sounds like a cliche, right? We're the land of opportunity. If you are deliberately trying to destroy that, you are striking at one of the sort of fundamental through lines of how people at least think about or envision America. Whether or not that's true for everyone is a second, story. But it's an important idea. It's bound up with the becomingness of America. The fact that America itself was a country that sort of became of itself very deliberately, and that people come here to become. We are about becomingness, and that's smacking at that and basically saying, well, you're either at the top or you're nothing. And that's not what our country should be. And I don't think most people want it to be that way either.
So I guess we just keep speaking up, right?
We keep speaking up. We all keep speaking up. All the people here, I don't know, however many they are, they're here and they're engaged in this conversation. I say this to my podcast people on Fridays. Keep speaking up.
Hey, speaking of which, we need to let people go, but tell people where they can find you.
Oh, yes. Okay. So what we're doing now goes to both of our YouTube channels. I know last time I said YouTube page because I'm an old, but regardless of that,
once you did that, that was good.
It goes both of our YouTube channels. So I would just say, go and find me on YouTube as well. I'm there. I'm posting. I have a podcast every Friday morning, History Matters, and so does Coffee, although I haven't had it yet this morning. And that gets posted on my YouTube channel as well. So there's more content there if you're interested to find more content. Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure. It is always a pleasure, Heather. This makes me happy about the morning. Are you going to get outside today? I am. I'm going to go to the farmer's market. It's gorgeous here. It's not bad. It's not raining. And I'm going to the farmer's market and going to go see what I can find. Sounds great. Sounds great. I'm going to try and get out on the water this afternoon. Although if you never hear from me again, it's because I've been cleaned out by a sturgeon. Let me tell you.
Stickers are huge.
I want that on your gravestone. Cleaned out by a sturgeon.
That's right. That's right. And not happy about it.
I'm not happy.
All right. So thank you. I will see you again next week, right?
I'll see you again next week.
All right, Joanne. Have a good day. Love you.
Love you too.
Take care.